Right, so we're looking now the second lesson in this topic on marginalization and radicalization. So we saw in the first lesson that the key result we're really focusing on was how marginalization can lead to the fundamentalist views, support for fundamentalist views, and then here we're seeing how it could lead to support for a radical group. Okay, and so we're looking here at linking marginalization with being more likely to join an extremist group, such as ISIS. So again, review the definition and just remind students that the example of globalization we're looking at here is immigration. And then immigration influences identity through the different acculturation strategy that's used. And then that different strategy can also influence the mental health, i.e. could lead to significance loss. Now we're looking at that significance loss leads to radical interpretations of Islam. We looked at that in the last lesson. And now the second result of the study was that it might increase support for a fundamentalist group such as ISIS. Okay, all right, oops. All right, so there's a code just to review the contents of the unit. So there might be some answers that they can't do because we haven't covered it yet, but most of the unit is covered in that one. Give students a piece of paper. See, can they say what is ISIS? Like we've talked about it. This is really what we're trying to explain in this topic, and I'm sure they would have heard about it. But could they even say what it stands for? What do they know about it? So this is just a good way to tap into what they know about this topic already. If you want to, there's a 3-minute video here on the rise and fall of ISIS. Okay, now this is a pretty interesting video, 8 minutes, and this is following a girl who the ISIS is trying to recruit. And as students are watching it, see if they can see any reasons why she might be vulnerable, and see if they can pick up any autobiographical details or biographical details of her life that might suggest why she could be vulnerable to this type of recruitment. Now, then they try to use the information on the textbook, page 48 to 9, and what they're really focusing on there is this idea of significance loss. We're introducing that again, or reminding them about that, and can they link anything from that video to this idea of significance loss? And do they think she might experience it? Is that a risk factor? But it may or may not. I don't think she's a strong case, perhaps, for significance loss. But it's just getting students to. I mean, it's just a good video to show a real life example of how this type of recruitment is trying to happen. Now, I hope this isn't a controversial activity, but I've developed this recently, and I really like it when we're looking at risk factors for particular things. So students create a silhouette, or they create an image, and they want to create the ideal ISIS recruit, and that should say ISIS. I'll change that spelling. So what they do is that they create a diagram, a silhouette, something like this, and then just around it they come up with some characteristics that they think. So if one of them, for example, you would hope would be has experienced lots of discrimination. There'll be one has experienced or was marginalized, or hasn't adapted to their new culture. And they could even come up with some fictional and go further and make specific fictional details if they want to. They can get creative. And then the second step is they can use this information in the textbook, what they know already, and then the second step is they label their diagram with the evidence. So it's one thing to say these things, right? This is going to make an ideal recruit, but then they have to show the bits from the evidence, and that's mainly going to come from Lyons Padilla's study, the different correlations there that might make that a risk factor. I really like this. I do this for PTSD. Create the world's most likely candidate for PTSD, and even I think the just tapping into that just makes it a little bit more interesting, and kids get really engaged. Just give them a blank A3 piece of paper is what I do with this, and then you say, right, create me the world's most likely candidate for, and then here you could say to become an ISIS terrorist. And it's just a little bit more of an interesting way, an engaging way to get them thinking about risk factors and the research. Okay, and then now after they've done that, hopefully see can they explain this diagram, and we see what changes here is this box. I'll talk about that next in the next lesson. That they measure two things here: the support for the fundamentalist group and the radical interpretation of Islam. But pretty much all these correlations stay pretty consistent. And so in the beginning, hopefully, in the beginning this was probably very overwhelming and quite confusing, but hopefully by now they'll be able to start to piece this together a little bit better. Okay, and I like to use traffic lights for checking in with this one. All right, and so that's the end of that lesson. And in the next lesson, I'll change that. We should be looking at defenses against extremism. So now we've looked at the root cause. How can we protect against it? That will be coming up in the next lesson.